Hello and welcome to another episode of Good for Profit. This is your host Mo, and we are bringing you a special release for the end of the year 2022 to celebrate Christmas and New Year's and enter the new year in style. We're bringing you around 10 conversations with mostly founders of tech for good startups, but also founders of businesses that are for profit and for good at the same time, as is the theme of the podcast. So without further ado, let's dive into one of these conversations. I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did. Charlotte, hi. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So I don't know if I should dive right in as we tend to do sometimes, or just start with the more lighthearted stuff. I'll let you pick this time.
Let's go lighthearted.
All right, awesome. So perhaps maybe start off by telling us a little bit more about yourself and a little bit about Belu Water, and then we can kind of dive into the purpose behind it and what drove you to do it and all that good stuff as well.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm co-CEO at Belu. I've been in the business coming up to about 7 years now. And I joined the business after a fairly long career in corporate, primarily in retail. And I love my time there. I worked for some big brands. I had really kind of got to the point where I felt that I had achieved what I wanted to achieve. But I'd sort of fallen out of love with it, if I'm honest. I'd in that time also had 3 kids and went on maternity leave with my third one and thought, I need to do something different. I need a break. A break with 3 young children, probably not quite the break you envisage, but actually I did consider taking a bit of a career break because shareholder value was not necessarily aligned with my values, and I think I'd got to the point where I didn't want to get out of the bed in the morning and not feel fulfilled in what I was doing. So I kind of took a break and got approached by Belu, who were looking at that time for a COO. And thought, social enterprise. Didn't know that existed. And that's kind of how I ended up there.
Wow, that's really interesting. The whole getting out of bed in the morning thing is something that kind of is quite close to my heart as well. I think everybody should get out of bed in the morning wanting to go to work, right?
Yeah.
Not feeling like they're going to dread the day kind of thing. That's really cool. So prior to that experience, you had never done anything with social enterprises then? It's just been purely corporate?
Purely corporate, didn't know social enterprise existed, knew I didn't want to go into charity, but equally knew I didn't want to stay in what I was doing. And so my default was just, let me take some time out, let's bring up the kids, let me figure out what's next and how can I better use the skills that I'd built up over 15 years to do something that was a little bit different, that gave me that kind of energy and that purpose.
That's brilliant. And Belu Water knocked at the right time then, I guess. So you joined as COO to begin with, is that correct?
Yeah, I joined as COO, yeah. Awesome.
And now you're co-CEO.
And now I'm co-CEO. Yeah, so it was lockdown one. Yeah, lockdown one. It's all a bit of a blur the last 2 years. Lockdown one,
of course.
The outgoing CEO.
I always forget how many years there actually were.
Well, how many lockdowns were there as well? I mean, the whole thing's a blur and a distant memory, right? But yeah, no, so beginning of lockdown one, March 2020, the outgoing CEO had left the business. Interesting timing. We obviously didn't realize what we were about to enter into, but probably the most turbulent time that Belu has experienced in the last decade. And Nat was the incoming CEO who I'd interviewed. I discussed with the board being the CEO and decided that it probably wasn't quite right for me at that point. Quite grateful I did that, given what then came through. But Nat joined, and it was kind of in the summer of 2020 as we were sort of co-creating, I guess, what was the survival plan for Belu and what was actually the growth aspiration. We sort of co-created it. And I suppose what we do is we talk about ourselves as being the co-founders of the next 10 years. We're not Belu, back in 2020, we were looking at the business plan saying, can we exist? Should we exist? What could we do? Because nobody knew how long that lockdown was going to last. So we sort of reframed, I guess, our purpose, staying very much core to how it was founded, but actually reframing it and repositioning us for the next 10 years. So looking forward to what could we do, which, if you remember how bleak it was that year, felt quite ambitious at the time.
Absolutely. Yep.
But time well spent. And it was in that period that we then talked about, actually, why wouldn't we be co-CEOs rather than a CEO and a COO, when we brought very different things to the party.
That's so interesting. I think that the co-CEO role is not one that you see all too often, but it can be quite interesting. I think I've heard a few people there are a couple of examples of companies that have done really well as with co-CEOs. But it's interesting because one of those things where, a lot of people will say that a ship with two captains will sink, in a sense. But I guess in some cases it works. Is that because just you bring such different skill sets to the game that you both really kind of complement each other, and basically you both of you are together as if you're one CEO in a way?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, there's a number of different things at play. Co-founders exist and nobody questions the co-founder.
That's very true. That's very, very true.
And at the end of the day, it's just, it is just a title. We were talking about it yesterday. And, I think people define CEOs in a certain way and say, therefore you need to be this person. Actually, the role of the CEO is to create the team around you to support you in the delivery of your business plans. And actually, Nat and I do have very different skill sets, and we therefore come to any challenge or opportunity with a very different kind of mindset. And I think in doing that, we can better navigate. We challenge each other, and I think certainly, given the challenges that we faced with COVID, it's given us that confidence that I don't know, maybe on your own you wouldn't have, because it's quite lonely actually being at the top in a time of turbulence and tough decisions to be made. I think low ego is also quite important. Neither of us have anything to prove per se. And we have co-created where we're going. So, we are very much aligned on the direction of travel, and we have really clear lanes. And we, before we even told anyone about this, we kind of played at being co-CEO to see, did we like it? Did it work? What would we need to change? How do we operate? So we spent quite a lot of time thinking it through before we even announced it or proposed it to the board originally, and then put it live. So it works for us.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Sorry. Yeah, no, that's incredible. I think it's a really interesting way to go about it. And actually, I think that, in a way, having that kind of load or stress or whatever between two people is probably better for everybody's health as well, rather than kind of being with one person. But also, you're 100% what you said about kind of building the team. That is the most important thing, is building the right team around you that complement you, and that sort of like augments any potential gaps you have. And so ultimately it makes sense. It's really interesting. I think, I wonder whether we're going to see more and more of that as time goes by, and as people realize that actually it's just kind of like having co-founders in a way. So it's quite interesting.
Who knows?
Belu Water in general, Belu Water in general is quite interesting. So can you maybe tell us a little bit more about what Belu Water does, how it works? It's obviously a social enterprise and donates 100% of its profits. Is that correct? To WaterAid. That's brilliant. So,
that's right.
First of all, how did that come about? Has it always been about WaterAid? And if so, why specifically WaterAid?
Sure. So Belu was founded with a belief that there was a different way to do business ultimately, and that through doing business you could help to solve some of the world's problems, the challenges that we face. So really, this was founded back in 2004. So, it was well ahead of its time in the thinking, and I can't take credit for any of that because it was founded by a guy called Reed Padgett. And originally, the monies that they committed were to works that they undertook themselves. But it's there's a specialism to delivering that kind of activity, and it wasn't a commercial business model ultimately. So it was recreated in 2020, no, in 2011, as effectively the Belu you know today. So it was rebranded to the branding that you will see on our mineral water bottles, and the partnership with WaterAid was created. So we've been in that partnership with them for 10 years. We are committed until 2030. So a good few years ago, we aligned ourselves behind the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the commitment that by 2030, we would work with WaterAid, particularly around SDG 6, which is all around water. And, the partnership is quite unique because obviously it is an exclusive partnership. But I guess the other thing that we do is that we always endeavour to think environment first. So we like to challenge the market, I suppose, and demonstrate that things are possible where, your supply chain may say, but that won't work, or you can't do that. And that drives our MPD in particular, and our diversification strategy will always be around sustainably what's the right thing to do. So it's a really, it's always been a kind of a balance between what's right for the planet and how do we then deliver the social impact, which is the social enterprise side of it. So it's quite a unique business model, but one that's increasingly, you hear people talking about what they're doing on both sides now, but for its time, it was unique.
Yeah, I mean, 2004, that is a long time ago, and I don't think many people were thinking about the environment back then. Nowhere near to the extent that we are now anyway. Yeah.
Alas not.
That's really interesting. Yeah, exactly. It's brilliant actually, because, this whole concept of creating good through making profit, in a way, is kind of what we're all about here. And and it makes total sense. It's like, there's no reason why you cannot build profitable business models that are very good for the world and that leave a positive legacy behind them and that leave Earth ultimately a better place for future generations. And so it sounds like that's exactly what you guys are doing, and it's just brilliant. You must have some sort of internal, I want to say, goals or things that you're aiming for, right? How do you sort of think about the impact that you're trying to make? Do you think about how much sanitation problems you're fixing around the world? Do you think about how many people you're providing access to fresh water to, for example? Or how do you sort of try to quantify those things internally for yourselves, if you do?
Yeah, I mean, we operate very much as a commercial business. So, we are a business, we're not a charity. So primarily what we're focused on is how do we grow the Belu impact through our sales. So we don't rely on grants, we don't rely on fundraising. For us, it's about selling our products. So the focus for us is, have we got, a viable proposition for the market that we are working with? Primarily, it's hospitality and corporates. Is that environmentally better than what else is there? So, if I think about bottled water, why do people still import bottled water when you can buy British? That, for me is still something that I marvel at. And actually, ideally, can you get rid of single use? Because the argument shouldn't just be about plastic, it should be about all single use. And therefore, if you can, for us, then let's move on to filtration. So for us, it's taking people on the journey. Not everyone is ready for that. And we need to be mindful of the fact that everyone has their own commercial model. So we focus on that and the growth opportunities there. And we are quite bold and ambitious, I think, at the moment, despite the economic backdrop and everything that's going on. We think in the long term, there will be huge growth opportunities. Pre-COVID, we're about a £6 million turnover business. We want to get to double digits by about 2025. That's going to take some growth. And in doing that, the beauty is that we know that we can support WaterAid in their efforts to bring clean water, sanitation and hygiene to, millions across the world. And we will be a small part of that. So we do focus on that. And we had a great session with them the other day, upskilling some of the new team members so that they had an appreciation for how they go about that, because it's not just about installing, water. It's about the education, it's about the advocacy, it's about the communities and how they come together and then manage that access. So we kind of work with WaterAid, and I guess use them as our expert in wash, because that's what they are. It's a real specialism, which is why we're so proud of that partnership. And then we also look at, what else can we do beyond that? So one of the things that we're really keen to do is see impact more locally as well. So we are looking currently at working with people like the Canals and Rivers Trust, and we are working with them on a project particularly close to one of our manufacturing sites. So we sort of have impact from a sustainability perspective as well as a social impact, but that can only be delivered by a sustainable business model ultimately. So for us, it's that kind of commercial focus with the, rather than profits going to shareholders, we deliver our purpose, which is to change the way the world sees water. And that's the ongoing kind of debate. How do we do that? What can we do? How do we make it bigger?
That's incredible, and great timing too, because, and I don't know if everybody is aware of this, but, do you want to go a little bit into the potential water problems that are upcoming for us around the world? Is that something we want to dive a little bit into?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's starting to hit the media headlines, but I think the the reality is, there are millions across the world that don't have access to safe, clean water. But actually, climate change is making that increasingly more difficult. So more people are being displaced, the water sources are becoming more contaminated. So, we do need to think about water alongside carbon footprint. Carbon footprint is one measure and something that we've measured for many, many years. But water scarcity is going to affect us in the UK, and people just don't believe that that's going to be possible. But there are certain areas within the UK that already are seeing water shortages. So we need to demonstrate, I think, and one of our focuses for this year is to better understand, what does best in class water stewardship look like? What do you do by way of replenishing what you're taking out of the ground? And we don't have all the answers yet. We don't know. We're a relatively small team, but even the FMCG companies that have teams dedicated to sustainability are still trying to figure out what we need to do locally. And especially in territories where they maybe manufacture, how do they not contaminate with, pollutants from a factory? How do they ensure that communities aren't adversely affected? And a lot of, water is a basic human right, and generally it's one of the first things that people need to get them out of extreme poverty is access to it. So it, in terms of everything within the UN Sustainable Development Goals, is probably one of the most, it's not the most important necessarily. I think it's really hard because I think all 17 have got a real role to play, but actually it's one of those levers. It's a critical lever to a lot of the other SDGs. So it can be quite scary. It's quite a daunting prospect. But we want to do a little bit to support and, I guess, bring some focus to it, because water is under supported and underfunded currently.
Well, it's really interesting you mentioned this last point, because it's not just about how important something is or how urgent something is to fix, but it's also about how neglected something is, right? And there are areas which have received a lot of funding, a lot of attention, a lot of everything in the media and from people. It's fantastic that those areas are receiving that attention and that many resources, right? But then you have other areas like, for example, carbon capture fell into this category until not very long ago. It's only starting to really see the light properly recently. But water is probably another one of those where, it's just a little bit more neglected. There needs to be a little bit more attention put to it and more resources pointed toward it. And ultimately thinking about just how urgent or how important something is to fix, they're not the only two criteria you need to think about, right? There are other things to take into account like that. So it's quite interesting you say that, and I think it's one of those things where, in most Western countries, at the very least, there's never really been a proper problem with water production and water cleanliness, at least over the last hundreds of years. And so I don't think people understand that is a genuine risk that is there.
No.
Obviously, not it's not a matter of, it's not. I think the the hygiene side of things is probably fine. It's more of the shortage side of things, more about understanding how can we make sure we're not contaminating the water, how can we make sure that we're using it, sustainably, and so on and so forth. And again, like, this creates massive areas for potential businesses to grow, right? If you can identify ways to help with, how to make like you were saying, for example, the work that you're doing around manufacturing and production. If you can find ways of making sure that it's all sustainable and that the water doesn't get contaminated, that sounds to me like an area where potential businesses can go and start and do great things. Or maybe Belu can go and do that, right? So, yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. It's amazing. So right now, then, if I understand correctly, so you do the water bottles, so selling water commercially within hospitality, mainly hotels and so on and so forth, but also the filtration systems. Are you looking to then attract a bit more of the kind of that B2C side of things and get more sort of direct consumer stuff happening? Or are you still looking to primarily work through the B2B side for now?
Yeah, I mean, so the direct consumer market obviously is huge. We like, I guess, the unique proposition that we have within hospitality is that we're not in retail. So we're in that sort of, do we, don't we? The phrase that I always say to team is, we're strategically opportunistic. If somebody came knocking and they were aligned with our values and they wanted to do something that was a long-term partnership, we would absolutely explore it. Are we knocking on the doors of all retailers? No, we're not. We don't believe that that's necessarily the right approach, because we want a business that is in partnership with those that we supply. So we're not about being listed today and gone tomorrow. And having been a buyer in retail, I know exactly how it works. For us, it's much more meaningful to have a long-term partnership with someone. And generally in hospitality, that's what we've found, is that we've partnered with people and we tend to be their supplier of choice for years and years and years. And that's I guess that's our differentiator. So we did switch on in lockdown a kind of shop on our site, and we had some sales through that, and that was lovely through lockdown, and we still continue doing that, but it's a really small percentage of our sales. So, currently in the current guise of Belu, possibly not, but who knows for the future? It's obviously there as a market. But equally, we like the fact that you can't find us on the supermarket, because that then means when you see us in a hotel, it feels a little bit more special.
It's a special thing, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant, which makes a lot of sense from a positioning standpoint and everything. It makes a lot of sense. In terms of, so I mean, we kind of started talking a little bit about some of the deeper stuff nonetheless. But I want to dive sort of another layer deeper and ask, on a personal level for you, what is it that gets you up in the morning and makes you want to do this every day? Why do you do this? Why do you bother?
Oh, good question. Lots and lots of reasons. I can't imagine not working, for a start. I have a busy mind. I like to feel that I'm taking action. I want to be a positive role model for my kids. I've got 2 girls and a little boy. I want them to see that it is possible. It's possible to have a career, and it's possible to do things differently. I like the challenge. What we're doing is running a business that has purpose at its core, and the values are our DNA in a way that I have never experienced in corporate world. I think if we can do that and people are inspired by it, that's quite an achievement in itself. I love the fact that we don't spend lots of time talking about what we're going to do. We just get on and do it, and then we demonstrate in the results. So, I think for me, there's a balance of the personal kind of stimulation of working, but the fact that actually in doing that, we enable amazing things to happen across the world, is that kind of extra layer of, that's why I do it. That's why on the tough days you get out of bed. But also the team that we're creating is amazing. And, I think a lot of people, when they see us out and about in, particularly if you live in London, we're in a lot of hospitality outlets, and you think, gosh, there's a huge machine behind it. actually, there's only 13 of us, and that feels quite big now. We were 6 in 2020.
Wow, that's
So
incredible.
yes, it's
Wow,
so that for me
wow,
is quite powerful. It's, a
of
small number of people
course.
can have quite a significant impact. Um, and I feel really proud. We've given WaterAid 5.2 million now. And for me, I hope that's only the beginning. So having a clear path to 2030 and, our big goals kind of out there is, it's a slightly uncomfortable place at times, but things are open again in hospitality. I feel very optimistic, and I feel really lucky because for me this role is fulfilling in a way that I probably hadn't appreciated other roles weren't.
Very interesting. So you only kind of realized what you were missing out on after you actually started doing it, in a sense, right?
Yeah, because you don't necessarily know it's there. You don't know that what you're missing can be fulfilled, and it would probably be a tough ask for me to get to articulate that 7, 8 years ago. But now I've been in it and living it, I can see how it's just so much more exciting. It's a small business. We can say something today and do it tomorrow. There's not stakeholders to manage. There's not multiple layers of sign off. Um, it's much more freeing.
Agile.
It's
Yeah,
agile, definitely agile. Yes.
yeah. That's the beauty of working in the startup environment versus the corporate world. There are not so many loopholes to jump through, not so much bureaucracy.
Indeed.
Everyone's empowered to kind of
Yep.
go and roll with things and try things out and come up with ideas and so on. So it's amazing. Um,
Yeah.
Again, slightly more personal question, but sorry, go on. Did you have
No,
something
no,
to
no. Go
add?
on. No, no,
Awesome.
no.
So one more thing I wanted to kind of ask, is slightly more, again, a little bit more personal, but do you think that, I mean, I'm not sure how old your kids are, but do you think that having children is something that changed your mindset on things, or did this shift just happen anyway? And it's sort of like going from the corporate world into doing something that's much more purpose driven.
I mean, I think kids do change your outlook, undoubtedly. Did they change? I think I was more appreciative of the world that I wanted them to experience, and therefore my role within that. So by that, but I think I didn't. Yeah, as I said at the beginning, I'd fallen out of love with what I was doing. I didn't feel proud of the things that I was doing necessarily. And therefore, if at that point they'd been able to speak and ask me, I would have faltered. And I think having them, it gives you a time challenge. And the reality for me was I couldn't operate at the level that I was operating at and be available for the kids in the way that I wanted to be. So I naturally had to make a choice. And that choice led me to then reevaluate what's important. So I think in part, yes, they having them did mean that I gave myself that time, because otherwise I was just in that kind of wheel of, well, this is what you do, and you get promoted and you move up and you get more responsibility and you work more hours, and it
Not really thinking
to
about
what
it or
purpose?
questioning
I
it
think
too
you
much.
don't. Yeah, until you either burn out or you're forced to
Not
make that
great.
change. And maybe that's what the kids did. They forced me to question what's important and what are my priorities.
So it's very interesting. The reason I ask this question is because whenever any of my friends, I'm getting old now, but whenever one of my friends are having kids or something like that, they the feeling of having a child for the first time is just something that completely changes your perspective on life, according to them. And so I'm always curious to understand, when people make these career changes, make these shifts at some point in their lives, I always wonder whether having children is a factor amongst other things that kind of cause them to make that shift in a way. So yeah, so just curious.
No, I think you're right.
Making that kind of career change, making that kind of career change must be so tough though. And I mean, for you, it was a little bit easier because you knew that this isn't working. You're falling out of love with it. You just want to go ahead with it. was it complete coincidence that you landed into this, or did you take the time to think about, what do I care about, what cause areas do I care about the most, or whatever, or was it just kind of a bit of like luck and good timing?
I think it was serendipity. Um, I mean, I got approached for the role when I was, I don't know, I think my youngest was about 3, 4 months old. Yeah, I wasn't in the mindset of, I hadn't even got to the let me do some research. I was still very much, up to my ears in nappies and two that were under 4, and just and the call came
The best age ever, I hear.
Yes, the best day. I'm glad they are some years behind me now, but at the time, I remember thinking, "New job? What? Oh, social enterprise." So I wasn't quite in the mindset. So I hadn't actually got to the point of figuring out what it was I wanted to do. But
Sure.
what it did do was it sort of highlighted to me this whole world that I didn't even know existed. And then having had an initial conversation, you clearly start having a look on the internet, and the more I read, the more I thought, this is amazing. A business that delivers impact, and that I guess would play to my strengths, and therefore the
And
transition
that isn't a
sounds
charity,
huge,
is that
but
what you're trying to say?
actually, well, it is a charity because I knew that I wouldn't.
Yeah.
For me, I like pace, I like action. I just don't think I would have thrived necessarily working within a charity. I think that for me would have been like big corporate. Actually, it wasn't that agile startup. Let's do this. Let's make it happen. So yes. So no, I think
And huge boards as
yeah,
well
I
in
think
many
like
cases.
serendipity. Yes, huge
Brilliant.
boards and
Wow.
trustees and stakeholders to manage. No, I'd done my bit on managing that through matrix structure and that sort of thing.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think, I mean, there's been a lot of studies done on the what size the board should be, for example, to be the most effective. And I think charities don't tick that box, unfortunately, right now in terms of the amount of trustees that will sit on a board for one charity. It's insane sometimes. Uh, so yeah, so I can totally understand that, wanting a more agile environment, probably not the environment you want to be in. I understand. Although there are some,
Yes.
newer models out there, and newer types of things out there that are looking to kind of, break that, which is really good, really, really good.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
going a little bit further back now, to studies, did that impact at all? And is that still helping you to this day? Do you think you study economics, right? Politics and economics, is that right?
I did. Yeah, I did. Honestly, no, not really. I had a great time at uni, as most people
I
do.
love that. That's a
Didn't
great, honest
probably
answer. I absolutely love it.
yes, I ticked the box. I probably learned more from my first year working, where I did a year's training to be an accountant, actually, that I think was the best commercial grounding I could have
Wow,
had.
interesting.
I didn't progress to being an accountant. I decided that wasn't for me quite early on. But actually,
Sure.
that year of that was more relevant to what I've then done subsequently than probably what I learned in my degree.
Done what you've learned there. Fair enough. It's quite interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of people go to uni, study one thing, and then leave it and go and do something completely different.
Yeah.
As is the case with many. So, yeah, no, definitely not the first one there. Um, Tell us a little bit more then about. Tell us a little bit more about sort of like, what future projects are you really excited about that, of course, you are able to share with us. I mean, there are some things you probably wouldn't be able to, but is there anything in the pipeline right now that's kind of like making you just really excited and wanting to get going?
Yes, I mean we've got agreement from our one of our main philanthropic investors to grow. So ultimately, we're now on quite an ambitious growth trajectory, um, and in 2021 we launched Belu in Hong Kong. So that was a bit of a left field project from lockdown 1 or 2. And that is not exporting our bottles because clearly we wouldn't do that, but it's installing filtration machines and enabling hospitality outlets there to remove their reliance on the imported water, because obviously in Hong Kong, the majority of their water is imported in the bottles. So that was a nice pet project that we've kind of proved. I guess that was our proof of concept. Can Belu's purpose resonate beyond the UK? And the answer is yes, it can. So, where might Belu pop up next? Who knows? But we are starting to think through, how would we do that and where might we go? And, what lessons have we learned in terms of how we did it in Hong Kong, and we would maybe, tweak. So that's quite exciting. We also launched a range. Yeah, well, and a bit different for a social enterprise. Social enterprise is vibrant across the world, but actually there aren't many that have translated their business model and kind of replicated it in other territories. And I think, when we
They
talk
tend
about,
to be kind of siloed in some way.
they do, and I think when we talk about going, we say we'll go global, but what we really mean is we'll appear in certain hospitality hotspots, probably in cities across the world. I would never be as bold to say we'll take over America. I think that would be a step too far. But I think there is an ambition for us to.
Well, you never know. Down the
You
line,
never
for
know.
sure, maybe. Yeah.
You never know. Never say never. By 2025, that was probably a little ambitious, but I think you'll see us pop up somewhere else. And the other thing that we did was we launched a range of mixers and tonics in the UK. So actually, that's a real focus for us in terms of growing that. And again, trying to demonstrate there are different ways of doing things. So we've packaged them purposefully in green glass to make the point that the majority of your carbon footprint is within your packaging and actually not necessarily the product. So again, always trying to provoke the debate and get people to question and ask. So why would I buy that over this? And so we've got a few bits in the mix, and to do that, then we're growing the team. So the biggest focus at the moment is actually getting some more people to join so that we can actually deliver.
That's incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, our sponsors, I'm sure, would be more than happy to help you with this. So yeah, we can put you in touch.
Amazing.
That's incredible. So with growth and expansion, do you think there are certain, well, I don't know how much you can share, by the way. You can say I'm not allowed to share. That's totally fine, of course. But are there certain regions or certain countries or certain areas that you think are sort of more urgent to move into and try and change things around so that you can make more of an impact as well as a business?
I mean, the honest answer is we haven't got that far. I mean, Hong Kong came about from an incoming inquiry, believe it or not, an incoming inquiry that ordinarily would have been responded to with a, really sorry, we don't export our products and we don't operate outside the UK. But because we were in lockdown and incoming inquiries were a little bit light at that time, our director of biz dev decided to have a call and explore it. And, so it's amazing what can come about. So we haven't really scoped. I think, the obvious ones for us are those where we could use the current partnerships we've got that are reliant on imported water and have a vibrant, thriving hospitality scene that, where they care about the provenance of their products and their goods. And because we know they are the early adopters in this. We can see that in the UK. So we know those are the cities that will be leading the way. And actually, Hong Kong's government had made a commitment to reduce their carbon footprint. And so businesses were being challenged with, looking at what they can do, and actually importing water is, highly carbon intense. So actually, anywhere that I guess has started to map that out would be a good target for us. But yeah, a bit too early to say for us, for sure.
No, of course, and I think it's really interesting you mentioned that, because it does also highlight the importance of the role that the government plays in kind of making all of these things happen. And it often starts with pressure from the government of, okay, guys, we have the targets, we have to meet them now, go figure. And usually we do go figure when we have those constraints, right? So it kind of just goes to show that the innovation is there, that people are creative. Exactly. People have tons of ideas of how to make things better, but it's just that until we see the necessity of doing so, I guess, in some way, then we don't act on it as much. But great to see that there are some people out there who start taking action in 2004. before it's
Yes,
even on other people's minds. So that's real initiative right there. It's brilliant. It's absolutely
it
brilliant.
is. Yeah.
I, I love it. It's really inspiring. I actually wanted to ask in terms of inspiration. Are there anyone? Is there anyone out there that you kind of that inspires you? Any person who inspires you? Any ideas or any books that particularly inspire you as a person?
Oh, good question. I mean, I think there's lots of new businesses that you see popping up, and there's it might be their brand comms, it might be the way in which you suddenly become a believer because you've seen it on Instagram and you're like, wow, where did that come from? How do I know about this brand? I think there's a lot of very clever people doing stuff that you don't necessarily always know about. um I would love to say that I am a big reader, but I'm not these days. I am converting myself to podcasts so that I do listen to
You know
something.
what? Yes,
Than yes.
absolutely, absolutely.
Um,
And
so so
not, not because this is a podcast, but everyone should definitely listen to more podcasts,
They
including
should.
this
They
one.
should. I've found it's my go-to when I take the dog for a walk on my own. I can just zone out and listen, which is brilliant. Um, so I think I heard Lily Cole speak actually the other week at an event, and was listening to one of her podcasts the other day, and that was amazing. I don't know if you've heard them, but she's written a couple of books. Who Cares Wins, and I thought that sums up quite a lot actually for me. Who cares who wins? There was just something about it being that call to action, and it is about caring. So I think she was amazing on stage actually, and the message was very simple. But very clear, and everyone could take accountability. It's not just the government, it's not just business, it's you as an individual. If you care, you can take action, you can choose which brands you buy from. So yeah, I thought she was really inspiring actually.
And I think COVID is going to show that people have it in them to undertake to actually make substantial sacrifices in the spirit of the global good, or the good of everybody
Mm,
else as well. And like when we were required to stay at home and not go out and everything, and lockdown was happening. Well, guess what? We actually did do it, right?
mm,
I mean, who would have thought that a whole population in the UK would have just sat there and just just did nothing for however long we were doing that for, right? Just working from home and whatever. And yes, of course, you're going to have people on the fringes who don't do it, and so on and so forth. But the majority of people, sort of thought that that's the right thing to do, and we'll kind of do our bit to help. And in
yeah,
a way, it just goes to show that people are have it in them to actually do something about things and make a change, if we see it as something that's important enough. And yeah, and it's very inspiring. Definitely, I think it's corporate, government, individuals. I think everybody should be thinking about what they can do themselves, even if it's something very, very minor. But as long as we're all doing something, um, it's really interesting. And that's in terms of sort of inspiration, from books and so on and so forth. Do you think about these things with your children as well? Do you think about how to inspire them to? I mean, you mentioned that you wanted to be a role model for them as well, but
yeah.
do you also think about how to inspire them even more to kind of look after the planet and try and do the right thing, whatever we think right is?
Yeah. Um, I think it's the other way around, actually. I think they inspire me. I mean,
Oh, that's brilliant!
but
Wow!
one of the things that I marvel at, they're being taught this stuff at school. They are being taught. I remember picking them up from kindergarten, and they had their different recycling bins for all the different materials that they'd used, and they were expected to take the paper and put it in the paper one, and take the bit of plastic and put it. So actually, you look at that and think, goodness me, their perspective on this is going to be so different. They don't need to learn this. This is the way in which they are being educated. Um, and my eldest now is almost 12, and she often will have read something or heard something and say, "Oh, did you know that such and such brand has done this and you shouldn't buy them?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, I didn't actually.
Wow!
Show me the
That is so
article." And,
cool.
and she's only
Did
12.
she
So
ever come to you and was like, "Have you
I,
heard of?" Yeah.
well, it's slightly embarrassing at times. She's obviously listening to the news more closely than I am, but I think I hope that what they see is inspiring to them. I think I know it is. She's definitely a budding entrepreneur already, my eldest. So I don't go about things differently, I suppose. You can only be who you are. But you hope in that they see it's not perfect. There is no perfect, being a mum, having a career, it's not easy. So you sort of muddle through and make it up as you go along. Only thing you can really do.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Just try and do your best. That's all we can all do. Do you have any words of advice for people who are thinking of moving into the social enterprise space, or thinking of doing something that is, good for the world, but also potentially profitable, or people who are in a corporate environment and just don't feel like they're doing enough, or they have enough, in a way? Do you have any words of advice for them?
I think stop thinking about it and get on and do
Putting you in the spot.
something.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I think it's fine thinking about it, feeling like you're not doing enough, but there's always something you can do. I think if you want to put the skills that you've built up in a commercial world to better use, then absolutely explore social enterprise. For me, that's a no-brainer. I think, if you're someone who's passionate about it and wants to influence corporates and stay within them, amazing, do it. We need more people championing and managing the stakeholders and showing them that there is interest within the business as well as influencing from outside of the big businesses. I think, there's read up, explore what's out there. There is so many small things that people could do, from changing their shopping habits to helping on a beach clean to volunteering. Some of the community efforts actually that we saw during the pandemic, I would hope they are still around and thriving. A lot of them about purpose and, even if it's just driving someone to the doctors or doing someone's shopping, or, people can just be kinder. I think, the kindness economy is talked about quite a lot in media. I think if that's your contribution, then absolutely amazing. I think the appreciation that we saw for the NHS during COVID was incredible. And I think just people not feeling like they can't do anything. There's always something you can do, but rather than feeling guilty about it or just talking about it, take action. Just go and do something, even if it's just an hour of your time a week. You don't have to change your whole career. You can just do small incremental things, and that will probably then build into a positive momentum. And before you know it, you might be volunteering to be on a board, or being a trustee, or whatever. But I think there are so many opportunities and so many ways for people to do something that gives them that feeling. And lets them explore, things that they don't necessarily understand or know exist at the moment.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's great advice. Thank you. No, that really is brilliant. Thank you so much. I think a lot of food for thought from today. It's one of those conversations I would love to, again, carry on. I feel like every time we have a conversation with somebody here, I just want to carry on having the conversation for 2, 3, 4 more hours. But I understand that you're probably well busy, and that we have meetings and so on. So potentially in the future, we'll explore doing kind of longer form stuff. But Charlotte, it's been real pleasure talking with you. And I actually just wanted to kind of ask you toward the end if you have any final thoughts, any final closing thoughts, and also if people want to find out more about Belu Water, what they do, what you do, where's the best place for people to go and check out some of the amazing stuff that you're doing?
Probably best to go to our website, which is belu.org, or you'll find us on Instagram and LinkedIn and all that sort of good stuff. So yeah, look us up.
Brilliant. We'll leave the links in the description so that people can find them and easily find what you're doing there. And yeah, I think, as you mentioned, you've got some opportunities for growth. So again, if there are people who are listening who are interested, I suppose, in this area, then perhaps keep an eye out on the career side of things. And yeah, thank you so much for being with us today, Charlotte. It's been really fun talking with you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Take care. We hope that you liked the episode. This podcast was sponsored by QFind, a hiring platform that matches candidates with jobs and employers based on many factors that ensure longer-term alignment. It goes way beyond package and salaries and takes into account much more than that to ensure a happy working environment for everybody. To find out more about this podcast and to see further releases, we'll be announcing them at the @qfinance.io Instagram page, as well as on the qfinance.io website, as well as from my own personal Instagram page and my own personal LinkedIn. All information you need that we spoke about in the podcast or this information mentioned here will be mentioned below in the description. So take a look, visit those links, and if you like anything or want to get in touch, please do. And lastly, stay tuned for more. Have an amazing week ahead of you.